I was recently talking to a hairdresser and she tells me, Leosha, I'm so afraid that my lungs are clogged with hair. And you know what? This is one of the most common medical myths I hear all the time. But the real story about what actually happens to our lungs is much more interesting and honestly more important to understand. I'm Alexei Kozak, a pulmonologist, and today I want to show you something that will make you look differently at the air we breathe every day. See these black spots in the image? These are real deposits of dust particles in a person's lungs. This is what they look like under a microscope. And this isn't some extreme case. This is an ordinary person who simply lived in a city. Right now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, there's dust in the air. What's the big deal? And I understand you. We're used to not thinking about what we breathe. But here's what's important to understand. Every day, our lungs process approximately 10,000 liters of air. Imagine a medium-sized swimming pool. That's how much air passes through your lungs daily. And in this air, there's always something more than just oxygen and nitrogen. The more toxic the city, the more harmful the work, the more of that dust will be deposited. This isn't about scaring you, it's just a fact. A person who works in a factory has different deposits than an office worker. A hairdresser breathes different air than a programmer, and our body is constantly trying to deal with this. You know what I like about our body? It's incredibly smart. It created an entire defense system against everything that tries to penetrate the lungs. The first line of defense is the hair in your nose. Yes, that same hair that we sometimes try to remove for aesthetic reasons. It works as the first filter, trapping the largest particles. But that's only the beginning. Next comes mucus, that sticky substance we often perceive as something unpleasant. But actually, it's a genius defense mechanism. Imagine sticky tape that moves upward along the respiratory tract. Everything that's stuck to this mucus is gradually expelled. We cough it out or swallow it without even noticing. And here we return to that myth about hairdressers. The hair they cut is too large to pass through all these barriers. It gets stopped at the very first stage. So a hairdresser's lungs aren't clogged with hair. This remains a myth that for some reason has firmly stuck in people's consciousness. But you know what actually passes through these barriers? Fine dust particles, those smaller than 10 micrometers. That's approximately 10 times thinner than a human hair. Now these can actually reach the deepest parts of the lungs, to the alveoli, those same microscopic sacs where gas exchange occurs. And here's where it gets interesting. The body tries to fight this too. We have special cells, macrophages. They're like the vacuum cleaners of our body. They capture these dust particles and try to neutralize them. But the problem is that if there's too much dust, the macrophages can't keep up, and then particles start to accumulate. I want you to understand one important thing. Small deposits of dust particles don't significantly affect health. This is normal. This is just life in the modern world. Most people living in cities have such deposits, and it doesn't mean you'll get sick. But, and this is an important but, there are nuances. Inflammation can form around these particles. Imagine a splinter in your finger. Around it, the body creates inflammation to isolate the foreign object. The same happens in the lungs. Only here it can lead to the development of fibrosis. This is when normal lung tissue is replaced with connective tissue, less elastic. Fibrosis is like a scar. Imagine that part of your lung becomes stiffer, less elastic, it stretches worse, performs its function worse, and the more such areas there are, the harder it is for the lungs to work. There are professions where the risk is particularly high. Miners, construction workers, chemical plant employees, they have significantly higher concentrations of dust in the air. And that's exactly why special medical examinations, respirators, and ventilation systems exist for them. This isn't just bureaucracy, it's real health protection. But even if you don't work in a hazardous industry, it doesn't mean you can completely relax. The air in cities isn't perfect either. Emissions from cars, industrial facilities, heating, all this adds particles to the air we breathe. Recently, I read a study where scientists compared the lungs of people who lived their whole lives in a village and those who lived in a big city. The difference was obvious. City dwellers had significantly more deposits. But, and this is important, most of them had no health complaints. That is, the body was coping. You know what amazes me most? How resilient our lungs are. They can work for decades in far from ideal conditions and still perform their function. It's like a reliable engine that continues to work even on not the best fuel. But this doesn't mean you don't need to take care of your lungs. There are simple things that can help. Ventilating rooms, walks in parks where the air is cleaner, quitting smoking, these are obvious steps. If you work in a dusty environment, use a respirator. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And if you suddenly notice that shortness of breath appeared where it wasn't before or cough became a constant companion, don't ignore it. It could just be a cold, or it could be a signal that your lungs need attention. A simple examination by a pulmonologist and spirometry can provide answers. The main thing I want you to understand, our lungs are an incredible system that works for us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They deserve attention and care, not out of fear, but out of understanding how important they are for the quality of our lives. Breathing easily isn't a given, it's a privilege worth appreciating and protecting.